VGC giving Death Stranding 2 5 out of 5 stars, saying that On the Beach is an epic big-budget sequel to Kojima's controversial cult classic. It offers a better story, an excellent cast of characters, and beautiful world to reconnect. Death Stranding 2 feels like the product of everything that's happened to Kojima since he left Konami, and it's easily one of 2025's very best. Death Stranding 2 On the Beach is an all-time great sequel and one of Hideo Kojima's best games. PlayStation Lifestyle giving it 10 out of 10, saying that Death Stranding 2 isn't the revolution the first game was. Instead, it refines almost all aspects of the original to make an excellent, well-polished experience. On the Beach firmly establishes the Death Stranding universe and makes it a franchise in which I could see many more stories told. It might be Kojima's most well-rounded title to date, and it shows that he's still got the touch even as he enters his 60s. Dexerto 5 out of 5 stars, saying that in every sense of the word, the follow-up is an improvement over the original. In many ways, it honestly makes the first Death Stranding come across as a tech demo, a mere proof of concept with how it evolves the formula and polishes every possible facet. Here we get Kojima's real vision executed seemingly without compromise, and it is utterly tremendous. But this praise for Death Stranding 2 right now is widespread. You have Jake Baldino of Before You Buy saying, "I like Death Stranding 2 more than the original. Starts off feeling samey, but quickly reveals fun gameplay improvements that I think fans will dig. The story is mostly paced much better than the OG. Sam is cooler, has more agency, crazy stuff happens, nice and weird, just how we like it." Gene Park of the Washington Post saying that Death Stranding 2 is Kojima's best writing in game since Metal Gear Solid 3. It is cleanest, most exciting narrative, and DS2 is Kojima Productions at the peak of their powers with robust cinematic set pieces and character moments that will keep you pushing through its mysterious plot full of surprises. This is another Kojima masterpiece. He's done it again, which this is just paragraph right here is music to my ears. Then even IGN got on board this time around, a 9 out of 10 instead of the controversial scores that we saw with the first installment with this franchise. But very much so, Death Stranding 2 On the Beach has firmly planted its spot in the 2025 Game of the Year conversation, up there with other games that have gotten similar scores such as Expedition 33, which I think is going to win a lot of these awards, Kingdom Come Deliverance 2, and Split Fiction. And I guess you could throw in Monster Hunter Wilds, although those performance issues probably going to delete it from the conversation. But Kojima has done it again, it seems, and these scores are just absolutely amazing. 90 out of 100 top critic average, 97% of critics recommending this experience, lots of 9 out of 10s and 10 out of 10s. And say what you will, Kojima was talking, there were some interviews from people that are associated with Kojima Productions saying that, Kojima made significant changes to Death Stranding 2 because playtesters thought it was too good. He changed stuff in the script and the way some crucial stuff happens because he thought his work was not polarizing. Well, say what you will, it doesn't appear to be too polarizing. Or, well, the areas in which this game is polarizing, it's more headache inducing, but very much so. I think people forget that Death Stranding, the first installment about 5 or 6 years ago now, 6 years ago, it was a very controversial release. A lot of people found it as a boring walking simulator. That was a lot of the criticism that people had with it, and here we are 6 years later with a more refined experience, it seems, and a lot of people falling in love with it, and that is honestly fantastic to see. But yeah, back then 79% of critics recommended it. It was still pretty high scores, but there was a lot of conversation that we really haven't had with a Kojima title, it feels like, in a long time. So this time coming around, seeing Death Stranding 2 getting these glowing reviews, very nice to see. But there definitely is some mixed ones out there. A 6 out of 10 from Restart saying that On the Beach review, here we go again. That seems to be some of the criticism that you have from some of the detractors right now, and it is that it's just more of the same, which I've seen that even in some of the positive reviews saying that if you're expecting a totally different experience, it's not that. And yeah, this one says that they didn't like the narrative. They said the antagonist is boring. The focus on combat takes away from the best parts of the game, but they say it's a beautiful and technical showpiece. Performances by the new and old cast are incredible. Walking around still feels good. And another negative review, well, not somewhat negative, 6.5 out of 10. Thanks, Sam, but Princess Beach is in another castle. And yeah, in their review, they cite the same things pretty much. The gameplay does not evolve compared to the first game. It's repetitive and unnecessarily long. The story is unnecessarily complicated and uninteresting, although unnecessarily complicated kind of just feels like Kojima DNA, and then yeah, similar things. Excellent technical section with spectacular graphics, some of the best acting, very good variety of scenarios and landscapes to explore. So the same pros and cons pretty much here. But this is where things get a little bit different, because we have GameSpot's review. And now when you think about criticisms with games, you think about like what those other, somewhat negative reviews were. They brought up points about the actual gameplay experience, things that didn't work for them. And I can respect those opinions, because not every game hell, Red Dead Redemption 2, I bring this example up all the time, but there's a lot of people that consider it a very boring game and they just did not like the mission structure. Myself, I consider it an all-time great experience. I just absolutely loved Arthur Morgan. I think with any game you bring up, there's people that are just not going to like it, and I can understand that, especially when we're talking about specifics with the game and, story, subjective things. But then we get to some of these reviews from outlets. These outlets do have power. I think people need to understand that. These are the ones that get these review codes, and a big outlet like GameSpot, you expect them to review this game on its merits, but then you get just mind-boggling stuff. This specific review is what I'm talking about. They say that Death Stranding 2 on the Beach is fixated on revisiting past ideas, which limits its impact to being a good but not great sequel, and they say it's tied up. That's what they call the review. It's not really a massively negative review, but I do take considerable issue when I see stuff like this in a review. The obsession with honoring past legacy also carries the baggage of some of the series' worst tropes, particularly around the portrayal of women. Yes, we're doing this again, and if you don't know what I'm referring to, doing this again, we saw this happen with Screen Rant last year. They did that with Black Myth Wukong, in which they dedicated a massive section of their review just specifically on the fact that this game wasn't inclusive or diverse enough, and they actually specifically pointed this out as one of their main negatives with the game, saying it lacks in inclusivity and diversity. A game about a fucking monkey, man. It was mind-boggling back then, it's still mind-boggling now, but these outlets, they hold power. These reviews contribute to places like Metacritic and OpenCritic, and we know that this games industry is fixated on those scores. And that's why these outlets do have power. They get these review codes, they get access weeks in advance, and then we get shit like this from this industry. And this is the type of stuff that deserves to be pushed back on. And if you don't, there are consequences. Consequences that we've seen in a number of sequels and follow-up experiences. Enabling these perspectives is push developers to pivot design to cater to it, and that is something that has plagued this industry the last number of years. Look at Dragon Age and Saints Row as prime examples. But yeah, let's continue on with GameSpot, specifically what they're saying with Death Stranding 2. The obsession with honoring past legacy also carries the baggage of some of the series' worst tropes, particularly around the portrayal of women, which the first game was guilty of, okay? While I can't speak with authority about some of the sequel's plot lines, including one involving a phenomenon around childbirth, some scenes caused an exhausting deja vu. There's an unskippable photography minigame. This is what they're putting a massive criticism on, featuring 3 women posing in front of the camera. I think that was in some of the trailers too, as well as a central character who often takes her shoes off as crew members make a running commentary around this habit. The camera pans during cutscenes aren't as excessive as, say, the treatment around Quiet and Metal Gear Solid 5. Of course, we're bringing up all of Kojima's quote-unquote sins, but it also feels unnecessary, and since you're witnessing photorealistic depictions of real-life actors, it can slip into being a bit weird. And again, I bring this up because this isn't just like this one little paragraph mention. This is a core thing that they point out as a bad part of this experience. They say that questionable tropes around women, and again, I just find that astonishing to put that as one of the core complaints that they have with this game, a mini game that they didn't like because of their interpretation of it. It just really does remind me exactly of what we saw happen with Black Myth Wukong from Screen Rant, and there are many more examples of this over the years. I brought it up constantly. A lot of this cultural outside nonsense these outlets just love to bring on in. Now, the complaints about Kojima and Death Stranding 2 and the supposed isms, this is something that's been going widespread over on the old Blue Sky, which is an echo chamber at this point. We did see a former Kotaku or Polygon journalist, now they work at The Guardian, saying a while ago now, hey Kojima buddy, do you want to explain why men in your games get actual names like Sam and Higgs, while the women get concepts like Fragile, Rainy, Tomorrow, and Doctor? You want to talk about that, friend? You know exactly what they're hinting at there, what they're pretty much trying to accuse him of. And somebody did call him out, fortunately, saying that men, Dead Man, Heartman, Die Hard Man, women, Bridget, Lisa. So yeah, this perspective, just a personal bias that they threw out there. And we did see, like I said, it's just a lot of people have also been complaining about the fact that all of the review outlets, I guess mostly it's males that have written these reviews, one of which we saw a journalist saying, I clicked on 15 reviews for Death Stranding 2 on major publications and haven't found a single from a woman. Am I missing something? This is normal for video games media, especially with big games, but damn, usually I can find at least a few. Big prestigious publications are typically very bad about this. Love to hire literary white dudes for big games / stories. Anyway, about to actually start reading some of these reviews, and again, these outlets chose who they wanted to write this for, and I guarantee you, we've seen this with the breakdown of many games over the years. There's probably going to be about a 70% who are actually playing Death Stranding 2 are male, or maybe even more than that. Like, this is just a breakdown that happens with a lot of these big games and games of this nature. I know some people don't like to hear that, but that is the truth, especially when you look at the actual data. We saw another person saying, look, I'm sorry, but I will never not respect Kojima as a creator. I know he can't write women, and he loves to ramble, but F me, this dude knows what he wants, and what he wants is weird BS. Another individual saying, one thing I like to see dealt with in the next 5 years is the weird, vaguely orientalist Japanese culture is different, so when games like Death Stranding or Yakuza treat women in weird, gross ways, we can't judge the Japanese devs because we don't get it. That's not true, it's gross. Again, find me an example of Death Stranding 2, and I don't want to hear that stupid mini game. These individuals always latch on to these broad terms of saying this game is problematic, but they won't bring up actual examples, because most of the time when they do so, everybody points out how stupid of an example it is. The person does continue, and I think this is another journalist saying, Kojima, if he's writing these games himself, doesn't want women to be characters. He wants them to be ideas, riffs on a theme or motive, but not really a human person. I think the closest he comes is Metal Gear Solid 2 or the boss from Metal Gear Solid 3, but outside of them, it's a real dumpster of bodysuits and thatism. Male reviewers don't even see the issue most of the time, and anytime a woman criticizes this misogynistic characterization, they're bombarded with breathless descriptors of glorious Nippon and their historic culture steeped in blah blah blah. No, it's regressive attitude towards women, not a sacred right. We saw another individual, another journalist saying, is it that women have no patience for Kojima games, or is that just me? And that was their response to why there's no women, I guess, reviewing Death Stranding 2, which make of that as you will. Another individual saying, I think this is really important, specifically in the context of Hideo. She breathes through her skin Kojima's specific history of writing female characters. Another individual saying, considering the way Kojima writes / designs women or handles some topics, having only men reviewing the games is a big miss. How is he to blame for any of this? The publisher put out these review codes and the outlets decided who did this. This is crazy to me. While the qualities and defaults of the game may be critiqued by all, it increases the possibility of missing key points due to a lack of different ways of experiencing life. And guess what? Those reviews are going to come after a lot. There's only 60 reviews right now, and I'm sure some of them are going to be negative and with crazy bullshit points that a lot of us are going to disagree with, and they'll be out there. And then there will be many others that will also emerge that will look at and say that, yeah, I agree with that perspective. These reviews will come. There will be hundreds, I'm sure. But right now we got the 60 or so, and that was decided by the big mainstream outlets, and somehow a GameSpot guy who just has to make a big complaint about a mini game. Like I said, some of these reviews, this process is totally broken right now. And the fact that it's still games media focused in this day and age is blasphemous. It's truly, honestly astonishing. This should be heavily favored to more influencers, YouTubers at this point, because that is primarily where audiences have pivoted these days. Say what you want, say what you will. Another individual saying, I genuinely like Kojima, but there's no denying how extremely bad he is at writing women at all times. Another individual saying, as excited I am for the game, I would have liked seeing more reviews from women because based on only on previews Kojima's given, Death Stranding 2 feels like it's doing that thing Kojima does with all his female characters except mom flavored this time. And again, these complaints direct them at the outlets, not Kojima. Another individual saying, I'm about 40 hours into Death Stranding 2. This is an actual journalist. I believe they work for a Canadian outlet. And as someone who didn't play the first game, it's been quite the experience. More thoughts on CBC Radio later this week, but for now, delivery, gameplay good, constant surprises, a story is idiotic. Kojima's woman characters may have gotten worse. And like I said, games media, their opinion on so many games, and the fact that they keep leaning into this cultural stuff, it's just something I strongly disagree with, and it only continues. And since we did bring up Metal Gear Solid, this is something that Kojima has been tacked on for years. Metal Gear Solid 5, yes, Quiet is a sexist character, but mostly just stupid. Forbes wrote that one back around 2015, when a lot of these outlets back then were going into overdrive. It's kind of slowed down, I think, as of late, but my God, it was getting really bad a couple of years ago. And then in another Forbes article written by somebody else, guilt-shaming Quiet women in Metal Gear Solid, you know exactly where this is going, but they do quote Kojima saying, in 2013, Hideo Kojima said he designed Quiet as an antithesis to the way women characters appeared in the past fighting game who are excessively exposed. He argued Quiet fits into the game's larger theme about misunderstanding, prejudice, hatred, conflict caused by the difference of language, race, custom, culture, and preference. And the best, like, Kojima has consciously chosen to make Quiet a symbol of sexuality, even as she doesn't seem to have any of her own, all as a way of showing how superficial people's responses to hollow signifiers can be, jumping at the sight of potentially offensive material and using it as a sawhorse for negating both the work and the person who made it. And the rest of this article kind of just goes on talking about Kojima and how he's problematic with women, with his games, like this one. Kojima's sense of sexuality in Metal Gear has always reflected a kind of joylessness. And yeah, like I said, these articles, these opinions, they have been around for a while now. Pace Magazine also had a mind-boggling one, the violent sexism of Metal Gear Solid 5. I think people forget, like, the controversial nature of all these games and the articles that were written about them. This paragraph is just mind-blowing. If we take this speculative reading to be true, then we have a problem that seems much worse than the current critical discussion around Hideo Kojima's That-ism. If war is the stand-in for the designer in the Metal Gear Solid series, and war necessitates the perpetration of that type of violence against women in that universe, then there's nothing casual about it. Instead, it signifies that Kojima has nowhere left to go. Design/war has to change to stay new, to always be one step ahead of the player protagonist. And so the real question is not, how did Hideo Kojima land here, but rather, can Kojima think this way out of this? And the drive for new narrative elements, Kojima has written himself into a creative corner. What we're seeing isn't just the product of that type of worldview, but instead a designer who, in his attempt to invent, to push, to surprise his audience, ends up being, or going, to a powerfully regressive and brutally violent place. That is a powerful piece, which just mind-boggling, these perspectives that have existed for a while now, and it continues to be perpetrated in articles like this, because many of these individuals followed outlets like this, and it just continues to be said, even though I find it honestly astonishing and blasphemous in many ways. But even back in 2019, we had reviews like this one written by Vice, which complained about Hideo Kojima's misdeeds with the Metal Gear series, which continues to bleed into reviews with current-day Death Stranding 2. But yeah, in 2019, this is what Vice magazine was bringing up. They said they were only introduced to Kojima by some diehard Metal Gear fans with Guns of the Patriots, and found that game both impenetrable due to its self-reference and deeply off-putting thanks to its an overtly juvenile and sexist authorial voice and directorial gaze. Death Stranding is hardly subtle, but its clean slate liberates it from the weight of series history that Metal Gear increasingly struggled to bear. And if it still has an objectifying camera, it's no longer leering, and the character designs are more functional than stylized or sexualized. I just find it crazy that this perspective is one that you don't hear with, like, male characters. It's only just with female characters. I just find it insane, especially with these games, you know, largely being played by a male audience. There is a want for stuff like this, and there's a reason why Metal Gear was so successful, and it is because of what Hideo Kojima, everything he did with those games. But very much so, we talk about this topic of sexualization of video game characters. The way that games media has talked about this for the last decade or so has been extremely hypocritical, especially between female versus male characters. I mean, we have PC Gamer, they ran this infamously a couple of years ago. Every dong in Assassin's Creed Odyssey rated. You won't see that with, you know, female breasts or any other, you know, that's just something that's outlawed. You can't have that, but male dongs, go for it, I guess. And then we even saw this one recently from PC Gamer. Gooner Game of the Year Stellar Blades mods are 41%, yeah, that word, ensuring gamers will never see the light of heaven. It is apparently always possible for there to be less clothing, almost complaining about this game because of it, you know, obviously steering and leaning into the male gaze, which, say what you will, there is an audience that want that. I don't see anything wrong with that, especially with there being a number of games that receive tons of praise for leaning into the female gaze. But for some reason, games media doesn't treat both the same way. And I think rightfully so, a lot in the gaming audience are calling these outlets out for it, and they deserve to be called out for it. But say what you will, I know a lot of people will run with, oh my god, that first one, the dongs, that's just a different journalist and all that. Well, this is the same guy. This is the same guy that wrote this one about Stellar Blade, complaining almost about it being too sexy. Well, he wrote, very handsome and beautiful withers, Baldur's Gate 3 mod turns your camp's ugly skeleton in a bona fide sex symbol. So very much so what this journalist from PC Gamer is saying is, this is okay, we endorse this, but, you know, Stellar Blade being sexy, That's problematic. And then in another article, another example also with Baldur's Gate, they talked about the bear sex scene was such an upward turn in momentum for the game that its animator called his mom to show it off. She was like, "That's weird. Should have pinned it to the fridge." Again, there's just a very big difference in tone. And again, a lot of people have been pointing this out for a while now. And then another PC gamer journalist, another one, they actually reviewed the PC port. They gave it a lower score. And again, their core, complaint, again, it's the sexiness. Not my favorite rendition of sexy souped up soldier saving mankind. They gave it a 68. And then again, maybe people pointing out the hypocrisy, talking about that this same journalist is the one that's right now praising a game called Date Everything, which turns everyday household objects into gorgeous love interests. And now I can't look at my refrigerator the same way. And mind-boggling stuff. And do understand that these outlets, these journalists, these individuals still hold a lot of power over the games industry, because those Metacritic, those OpenCritic review scores matter to the publisher. They matter to the developer. And until that changes and the power shifts away from those platforms, we're going to continue to see stuff like this. And very much so, criticism, pushback is needed. Now, whether it be this bizarre GameSpot review of Death Stranding 2, or the Blue Sky accounts complaining about Kojima, and the many different articles over the years complaining about Metal Gear and women, or even what's happening with Stellar Blade and last year with Black Myth Wukong, and even with what happened with Dragon Age the Veilguard last year. There's just tons of hypocrisy all across the board, and for the last number of years, it seems like from games media, a lot of this criticism, this outrage has been met to, it's been dismissed overall, and I just find that truly unacceptable. But anyway, what do you make of Death Stranding 2, the reviews that are going out right now, especially with the GameSpot one? Let me know your thoughts on that down in the comment section below. But thank you for watching. Make sure to leave a like if you did enjoy this video, or if you found any informative value. Consider subscribing for more videos like this. I'll see you later.